But let's focus on Suzlon Energy. It reported a good set of Q4 numbers. The revenues went up 30%, margins expanded, but the net profit slipped 8.6% year on year. We have Himanshu Mody, who's the CFO of the Suzlon Group, joining us now. Himanshu, hi, good morning, and thank you for speaking to CNBC TV18. You know, the execution in the whole fiscal, right, in FY24 has been a bit underwhelming, despite the kind of very strong order book position that you're sitting at. There was an expectation of 800 megawatts of execution, but that did not play out. What led to this? And now that we are in election season as well, what do you see as the way forward over the next, in the first half of FY25?
So, morning to you and your viewers. Firstly, let me just summarize our annual results for the viewers. So we did 664 megawatts of deliveries in FY23. As against that, we've done about 710 deliveries, megawatts of deliveries in FY24, registering about a 7% growth. From a commissioning perspective, which is what the actual turbines getting connected to the grid, we did 495 megawatts in FY23 as compared to 882 megawatts in FY24, which is a 78% growth from a commissioning perspective. Revenue, of course, registered a 9% growth to 6,497 crores in FY24. Now, operating parameters also have significantly improved for the company. For the full year, we registered a EBITDA growth of about 24% to about 1,029 crores. And a net profit PAT before exceptional items, which is the key word.
Mr. Mody, yeah, we actually know all of that data because it's already there in public domain. We want to just understand the way forward. What is the kind of execution that you're looking at? You know, what is the realistic target that you can have in terms of tendering of orders, etc. So if you can just help us with those numbers on what the way forward will look like.
No, I just wanted to correct because, you started with a drop that is incorrect because our net profit before exceptional items is what you need to look at from a apple-to-apple basis. So when you register or when you're reporting that a net profit is dropped, I'm sorry, unfortunately, that is incorrect, even on a quarter-on-quarter basis. So the numbers are there on a Q4 to Q4 basis. Our net profit was 68 crores last year, which has grown to 281 crores this year, registering almost a 410% growth. So those numbers, as you said, are there for you to see. Now, going forward, of course, we never started a year with a strong order book. We have about 3.3 gigawatts in order book that we're starting the year with. And as I mentioned, we have had a good execution growth in FY24. Whilst I can't give you an exact number on what we'll do in Q1, but suffice it to say that from an execution perspective, we are already from an industry, Suzlon perspective, and also we start the year with a fairly healthy order book and, of course, a healthy balance sheet.
All right, Mr. Mody, hi, good morning, and thanks a lot for clarifying on that front. So I'm reading from a brokerage note. They're expecting you to execute close to around 1.5 gigawatt in FY25 and then 2.5 gigawatt. So your order book is very, very good. But some part of the street is a little bit disappointed on the execution front. So tell us, does 1.5 gigawatt sound feasible for the coming fiscal? And also you gain market share in the past year. If the way sell-side analysts do calculate it as well. Do you expect to further increase your market share, I think, from around this 27-28% on?
So again, the country did about 3.3 gigawatts this year in commissioning. Now, our expectation is that, the country will be around 5 gigawatts in FY25. Now, whether we are able to maintain the market share or increase the market share is individual analysis. So whilst I can't comment on the brokerage report they're talking about, but if the country does 5 gigawatts, which is what our estimates are, and we're able to maintain a market share, even if not increase it, then, I leave the math to the analysts and the viewers.
So the math is there, 1.5 gigawatt then, presuming that 5 gigawatt is done in this year. Are we getting that correct, right?
That's our estimate, that the country should do 5 gigawatts this year. Yes.
And just to clarify on this order book that you're holding of around 3.3 gigawatt, it includes the recently won order, right?
That's right. So a lot of these orders, if you see, the street sometimes gets impatient. A lot of these order books have been ramped up by us in the last 4 to 5 months, right from January until May now. So, these are long-dated projects. people have now started, our customers have started planning almost 2 years in advance for the project execution schedules. And a lot of these orders, as I said, have been secured by us in the last 5 months. So we have those capabilities. It will take the time that it takes. We are very focused and on the patient and timely profitable execution of all of these projects.
Yeah. Himanshu, hi, morning. Prashant here. Now, impatience is the other name for the street. I think there's no doubt about it. But yeah, I mean, that's to be expected, right? And you're very well aware. So if you do 5 gigawatts of, so not you, but the total installation in the country is 5 gigawatts in FY25. I was listening to the call, and in FY26, Mr. Chalsani said that number could be between 7 and 8. I mean, at least that's the expectation. And FY27, it could be between 9 and 10. So would it be fair to kind of model taking a 30% share for Suzlon? That's the trajectory we're looking at?
So yeah, I mean, whilst those numbers are broadly correct in terms of our internal estimates and what Mr. Chalsani had said earlier in an interview with you guys, we need to also step back and see that the policymakers are very clear that the wind industry or installations by 2030 need to get to close to about 100 gigawatts. We are ending this financial year FY24 with about 45 to 46 gigawatts as an industry. So, steadily increase over the next 6 years. I think the industry is all geared up to meet that target of 100 gigawatts by 2030.
And another thing which I think bears watching is how much the centre starts to get involved, right, to sort out some of these land issues, because I think that is the big challenge in terms of getting fast-tracking some of this stuff, some of the numbers we're talking about. On margins, Himanshu, if you can guide us, because you've got a situation where commodity prices are hardening, and it's not just what's already happened, but forecasts also are suggesting that there's generally an upward bias for some commodities more than others. But will that be a bit of a headwind? So if you can guide us for FY25?
So again, whilst we don't provide any specific guidance, but I can generally talk about splitting our 2 or 3 key business segments. The maintenance or the O&M, as we call it, there I think we are sustaining an operating margin or EBITDA margin of about close to 40%. So I don't see any reason why we should not be able to continue to do so for FY25. So long as our manufacturing business is concerned, we've always historically registered mid-teens in terms of contribution of gross margin. Of course, this year we've ended with about 19.5% gross margin on the manufacturing business. Now, whether hardening of some of these commodity prices, we're able to maintain the margins, or there may be some slight impact on those margins, is something time will tell. But I think our margin profiling for the manufacturing business should continue in the mid to late teens vicinity for FY24.
So can you give us some more numbers, Himanshu, on the revenues and on the EBITDA? What are you targeting for the full year? On an average, you're sitting at about 2,200 crores per quarter in terms of top line. So what is a fair estimate of what FY25 could look like in terms of revenues?
So again, splitting our business segments, the O&M revenue would have a secular growth, which is linked to inflation going forward, at least in FY25. So far as the manufacturing business is concerned, it depends on the volumes we are able to deliver. Of course, our average selling price per megawatt, we maintained a little shy of 6 crores per megawatt. So depending on how much we are able to deliver in FY25 would determine the revenue that we do in the manufacturing business for FY25.
So O&M as a percentage of the top line is around 25 to 30%. Is there expectation that would improve further? And in terms of O&M margins as well, what are we looking at in FY25?
So O&M, you're right, for FY24 is about 25 to 30% of the overall pie. But should the overall pie increase, O&M pie, the pie would reduce for O&M because the manufacturing does increase, that 25 to 30% will reduce. And as I said earlier, from an operating margin perspective for the O&M business, we should be able to maintain about 40% operating profits.
Got it. Mr. Mody, what about competitive intensity on ground? Are you seeing more number of players, come in? Are the Chinese players like Envision as well, hurting the market? Tell us about the competitive intensity in the space.
So, certainly there are certain Chinese competitors that are quite active in the Indian marketplace. But, the demand is such that there is room for all of us to play. I mean, as you can see, as you rightly said earlier on in the call, from 23 to 24, we've increased our market share from 22% last year to 27% this year. And, this is a complicated piece of engineering. I mean, it's unlike solar, which is just panels, largely commodity. This is a complicated piece of capital goods. So Suzlon, at least has the competitive edge of the only turbine that is designed specifically for Indian conditions, whereas some of our other competitors that are coming from the Western or Eastern markets, as the case may be, necessarily don't have that competitive edge. So whilst there's certainly room for all, to flourish and play in the marketplace, but I think from a Suzlon product strategy perspective, we have our USP clearly cut out.
Okay. So, you've given your execution targets, right? And you've told us what your current order book. This has been your largest ever order book at 3.3 gigawatts. I just want to understand what's the order visibility over and above this current order book. What kind of visibility do you have over the next 12 to 18 months?
So it's a fairly active, negotiations on quite a large order book with different customers that is currently going on. Of course, I won't be able to provide any specific numbers. The street will hear about those orders, and then when we announce those, we have a fairly clear policy on when we get back to the street on our order announcement. But suffice it to say that negotiations our team is doing with quite a few customers on quite a healthy order going forward.
All right. Himanshu, we'll leave it there. You've find yourself in a pretty good spot, and there's a fair bit of tailwind, and hopefully, the bidding out process, and then finally the ordering, etc., will continue at the pace at which it has. So, thanks very much for joining us with that perspective for 25 and beyond as well. So that's Suzlon with some perspective.